folks, Ariel over here at Finance, and since it's not actually snowing outside today, but it's about 10 degrees this morning, which is pretty cold and frosty, and so I'm doing a few inside things before going out to work for the day. So I picked these yesterday, and what I want to show today is just something real simple. It's another kind of foraging wild tea that I make. What these are is pine, and not just pine, but spruce and fir tips. Earlier in the year, these tips are smaller and softer. We're getting late in the year. I didn't have time to do a video earlier, but I do use them year-round. But these were the new growth for this year. And I can, even though we don't have a bunch of pine trees right around the house here, the woods and mountains around me are covered in them. And so anytime you go for a walk, it's not that hard to collect a few tips. Now, I wouldn't take a bunch of tips off of one little tiny tree where you're going to kill the tree, but when you got massive 40-foot trees and you take a couple tips off of a few different ones, they'll never notice. Back to the general foraging principle of you don't ever want to take so much that you damage the harvest. Anyway, so this is a mixture of different things. One thing I want to say here is if you're new to foraging and you don't know a lot about plants, as far as I know, every pine and spruce and fir species is edible. They have slightly different flavors, but they are all edible. There is something that looks similar to some people. It's more of a bush, but called a yew. If you don't know what yew looks like, find out and don't eat yew. It's poisonous. To me, it looks fairly different. They're not that hard to tell apart. I feel in no danger of making a mistake. But if you're not familiar with different conifer species, make sure you know what yew is and don't go eating a yew bush from outside your window. Anyway, so what I do is I get water to not quite a boil. Now, water, up at over 6,000 feet of elevation, water boils here at about 197, not 212. But what I don't want to do is damage all the vitamin C and such, which is fairly high in pine tips. So this water is making just tiny little bubbles, not quite a boil. And I'm going to take these tips and I just snip them up like this because it's faster. I know some people will take a branch like this and pull all the needles off, and you can do that and use them like this for your tea, and that's fine, but that just takes me longer, and so I don't usually do it that way. I just take my tips, and the only reason I'm even snipping them up is to expose more of the surface area to the warm water to create the tea. And if you do that, you see how I spring pine needles all over the place? So what is actually easier, even than that, is if you simply take all of your pine needles, and you can wash these off if you want. I looked at them when I was picking them, and they appear to be clean enough for my purposes. I like keeping a few of those bags in my backpack anytime I walk around outside in case I find something I want to forage. So if instead you just drop all your tips in there, and then cut them up while they're in the warm water, and now I'm going to turn that water off because I don't want it to get to a boil. Cut it up while they're inside here, then they don't go springing pine needles all over your kitchen because the water contains them. So I just kind of clip those tips up like that for a little bit, and then I'm going to let it sit here and steep. And already they're turning a really brilliant green, like most cooked green things do when they start to change there. And so that's good enough. And that I'm just going to let steep for at least 10 minutes. And then I like to add a little honey. And if you have real raw honey, eventually it will crystallize, like you can probably see in that jar. Especially if you have colder temperatures. Things crystallize here for me faster probably than some places. But it has not gone bad. There's nothing wrong with honey. Honey never goes bad as long as it's actually pure honey. You can eat honey that's been pulled out of pyramids thousands of years old. Anyway, it's solid, so it's less easy to like drizzle on your piece of bread or something, but when I'm making tea, I use one of my jars that's gone solid, and I just dissolve that in here. And again, I don't want to bring my honey to a boil because I want to keep my raw honey raw, but I'm going to melt it into the warm water because it is so solid. So I'm just going to do like 2 spoonfuls of honey. This is entirely to taste. You can do this without any honey added. The pine needles are a little bit astringent tasting. They'll leave a little bit of that not bitter, just astringent flavor on your tongue if they're all by themselves. So the honey I enjoy the flavor of, plus of course raw honey is beneficial for you as well. And the other thing I like to do, and I've done plain pine needle tea, but again, because of the astringency with kind of the aftertaste on that, one thing I really like to mix with it is mint. This is some of my mint that I dried just the same way I dried the parsley the other day. Cut, bunches, hung them up to dry, and then crumbled the leaves off. So I'm just going to put a little handful of mint in there. You can do any other flavors you like. I like making teas of all of my weeds and wild forage things and herbs and so on. But a little mint flavor with the pine I find really enjoyable. But you can totally try just pine. But this is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to be one. But pine needle tea has been used by people for many, many, many years, including myself, because it is high in lots of vitamins. It's very good at helping detox. I wouldn't drink a gallon of it a day because, like a lot of other things, it can be a slight diuretic, so you do want to drink other things in your day. But I like making this, and I'll have a cup of it here in 10 minutes or so. Just strain the pine needles out. I just use one of my little strainers like this when I go to pour it into my cup. Or you could fish them all out with a bigger strainer, but I usually just pour some through that. That works for me. But it's beneficial, and if you don't live in a warm area where there is lots of citrus and stuff like that, things like pine needles, and I've done videos before on collecting rose hips, those are things that grow wild around my area that are also very high in many of those same beneficial nutrients and vitamins and so on. And I know some people are may have run into this video because they're currently interested in its benefits with helping detox certain injections that people are taking. Anyway, I've been doing this for many, many years, long before any of that, and I just enjoy drinking pine needle tea because I enjoy it. And it's kind of fun to serve to guests and ask them if they ever ate a pine tree before. And most people have not. But that's why I just give this a stir every now and then. Again, this water's just hot. I never brought it to a boil. And then I'll just let it sit for a bit before I strain some out. And then when I have some cold, sometimes I'll reheat it, or sometimes I'll just drink it, especially in the summer, as more of an iced tea. But that is how I make pine needle tea. Super simple. Over here at Fineth, thank you so much for watching these videos and spending some of your very valuable time choosing to do that. We hope you found something that was useful, educational, helpful, maybe save someone else some time and trouble, or just something just plain beautiful. If you don't want to miss any videos, subscribe and hit the bell. And thanks for coming along on our journey as we build a new little homestead with our tiny house and everything to come.